Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwinny Poon. This episode 467. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how are you doing?
Happy President's Day. Good to get a day off.
Good to get a day off, and what a president we have. We are joined by an NBA fan refugee, as she now identifies. SJ, welcome back. Happy to have you on.
Hello. How's everyone doing?
Doing well. We will talk about how you're doing a little bit later. But before we do that, I do have to make a few announcements. First being that Strickland has a YouTube channel where, if you're watching right now, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. Be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrict.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we've got it. The Strickland also has a Patreon, which you can subscribe to. There are a number of tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland, this podcast that I started Friday the Prez. You also get access to Takes from Obvious Bozos, a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, a.k.a. Doug, along with Zach Blatter. And you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. There are further tiers. There's a $90 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the Knicks team more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Marina, one of the best in the business, and you get access to Strictly NFL, a podcast, which you guessed it, is about the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Metrikos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. There's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and $100 tier. Those come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening in on pod recordings, merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours truly one day, whether you choose to subscribe. And none of this would be possible without you, and none of this would be possible without BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025, whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with a large selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. So speaking of betting, I have no idea if you could have gotten odds on it before, but I think if there's one player, or if there's among the group of players you would have considered never in a million years going to get traded this season, I think one of the strongest candidates for that would have been Luka Dončić, who then gets traded to the Lakers. I think that like collectively broke the brains of everybody. I mean, I think it was a really interesting trade, not in terms of any of the logic behind it, but more how people reacted. And it was like, I mean, there are people talking about that trade that don't even care about basketball, that don't watch basketball, that don't follow basketball. And I just feel like it was, I don't know, there's something that goes beyond, the on-court impact and, the assets and whatever. I think, obviously we will debate that and how, or not debate it, but probably all agree that Mavericks didn't get enough. But it just felt like, I don't even know. I mean, actually, I'll just let you talk about it because obviously you, as a Mavericks fan or a former Mavericks fan, experienced this in a way that is much more personal than it would be for me. But like, I've every fan has players that they become attached to. And obviously a lot of that has to do with just how they are on the floor, like how good of a player they are, but also just when you draft a player and you select them and you see them develop, it's a different thing. And, like even minor move or relatively minor moves, like when we've traded away Manuel Quickly, or obviously a more significant move back, 5-6 years was when we traded Kristaps Porzingis. These are trades that like kind of get at the heart of fandom in the way that they hit you emotionally as well, right? It's not just like, oh, let me see what we got back, let me value that, like what's better, what's worse, did we get enough? Like it goes beyond that. So I guess like what I mean, where did you, how did you even just like take it in when you first saw it come across, kind of like whatever, your phone or Twitter or whatever?
Well, first of all, I think this is a good thing. In the moment, I didn't see the news like immediately when everyone like was thinking Chalmers is hacked, all that. I didn't see that. So when I saw it, it was maybe like 15 minutes later when everyone else was confirming. Like I just so happened to be, I was dozing off. Again, it was midnight Saturday, random. I was dozing off. I wasn't asleep yet. I was like dozing off, and I just happened to open my eyes and just look down at my phone. And I saw the Chris Haynes tweet. I saw like sources, and like I just saw Luka Dončić. At that point, I wasn't even really reading. I'm trying to like blink sleep out of my eyes. Like I'm just like trying to figure out what's going on. And right as I'm trying to read that Chris Haynes tweet, that's when my former pod co-host Dwight, he texted me. He was like, "Hey, where are you? like what's going on?" Like we're all freaking out. I was like, "What are you talking about?" And then that's when I started seeing all the notifications. And at that point, people are texting me, as well, like, "Hey, what's going on?" Like, I'm reading the tweets and I'm seeing all the confirmations. And I mean, it took me like a second to just be like, "What?" Like, it was like, what was the only thing I could muster out for the first 3 minutes? Because it just felt unreal. Like, I think that's the best way to describe it. And then I mean, I lost my mind for a solid 2 days. I'm not gonna lie, I lost my mind for a good 2 days. Like the 2 days afterwards, conspiracy theories like felt so believable. Like then, just because logic, they just seemed to be illogical, and there was no rational way to think about it. So I was just thinking, oh, they're trying to alienate the fan base. They're moving the team. Like Nico was an inside guy, like sent by Rob Pelinka to destroy the map. Like I'm buying into all of that at that point, because I just could not believe they did that. Like, one, that they did that, and the return was so unbelievable. Is the part I'm really stuck on. It is so unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Davis is obviously a great player, but one, you're giving up the better player, the younger player, to get him, and Max Christie's nice piece. A 2029 unprotected pick is a thing that you get in trades like this, but you want all of it, and to not get all of it makes it even worse, because it's like, do you realize what you were giving up? Like it just feels like the entire approach. I mean, we were talking a little bit before you jumped, before we started, SJ, but like, if you're gonna do the dumb thing, then you have to at least like get everything you can out of it. And it just, and I like, if he wanted AD, right? Okay, fine. You want AD. I don't agree. If you're gonna trade Luka, I think it's misguided in 100 different ways. But given your roster construction, I don't think AD is really like the guy that you needed to go get. But if you're gonna do that, you've got to get everything else. You got to get everything else you can get. Like, and it's nuts to me. Like, I mean, even as really, like, you couldn't get Austin Reeves in the trade. You couldn't get Austin Reeves. Like, they're gonna get Luka Dončić. You can't get Austin Reeves. I just don't get. It just feels like he had a price in his mind of like, if this is like the bare minimum I need. If I get this, then I'm happy. Rather than I'm gonna start really. It doesn't feel like he pushed very hard to get everything he could get, and it almost feels like he got whatever bullied or mind fucked. Yeah.
If the other GM is saying that you gave them a gift, if he's saying this was the word gift, like, have you ever heard the word gift used a lot, like by executives around the league? A gift, like, if you're telling stories that, hey, everyone I told about the trade the first time, they laughed at me, isn't that not a red flag? Do you not see a pattern here, or question, hey, maybe what I'm doing is not really the right thing? But I mean, they did what they did.
It is, yeah. He said that when he approached Patrick Dumont, who's the team's president or whatever, that he thought it was a joke. It's like, yeah, that's. I don't even know, why are you telling this story? Why are you admitting?
He thinks it's funny. He's telling us he's laughing. He thinks we're gonna laugh with him. Like, are you stupid? Do you think we're gonna find this funny?
It's actually funny. So when we talked about, like, me and Stacey did a pod, I don't know, maybe last week or the week before, and obviously, like, this isn't comparable because Luka is he's a 5-time first-team All-NBA guy. He's already led the Mavericks to a finals. Like, he's just a totally different caliber of player. But the closest thing that we could kind of like try to compare it to, for us anyway, as Knicks fans, was trading Porzingis. But that was a totally different scenario because, one, Porzingis obviously was not this level of player. He was hurt at the time when we traded him. And there was all this ambiguity of like, did he kind of want to leave? Did the Knicks kind of want, like, it was this weird thing, and it was not the same thing. Like Luka's he's a stature of a player, a level of a player where if you don't trade those guys, like, quite unless they are coming to you and saying, hey, there's 18 months left on my contract, I have zero plan or motivation to extend here, so you can trade me now and get something for me, or I'm going to walk. Except in that scenario, you do not trade players like this. And he apparently, from his own words, like, he wanted to stay in Dallas. He wanted to take the max extension and stick around. And, like, I don't know. I think it's just unprecedented to me, for a player of that caliber to not even want to be traded and then get moved. And then just the way they did it, where it's like Nico Harrison didn't even talk to him. Like, he did not directly communicate to him that we're trading you. It's very it's like ironic in some ways, where he's talking about, Luka. He's kind of insinuating Luka, or not insinuating. I mean, they basically said it in every which way that Luka was fat. Luka didn't commit. He didn't work hard enough, and whatever. It's like, it's talking about all this stuff about, like, commitment to the organization. To say all that and then just, like, not even have the courage to communicate this to him face to face, or at least, directly on the phone or whatever. It's quite interesting. But Stacey, I don't know. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's cowardly. But Stacey, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate a little bit on the conversation, like, in terms of the Porzingis thing, because I mean, you were bringing it up, I think, as a little devil's advocate point, but I mean, it would be different if Porzingis was like this level of player, right? Then I think our reactions in the moment, and our reactions in the moment, were still pretty like, wait, we just traded Kristaps for a bunch of fucking cap space, and then you kind of get, like, the full details and see the vision, and it makes more sense. But I don't know. I think, like, I don't know if I would ever get over trading Luka. Like, I just think a player of that caliber getting traded is kind of nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's far from a direct. Players like KP get traded a lot, right? Yeah. Ingram got traded. I think KP, that's the kind of trade you're talking about a little bit. It's a little more analogous in terms of the type of player. I mean, there is no. I can scarcely think of. I mean, I think the comps that came up on the call in terms of a team fumbling a generational talent like that, like, I was thinking of like whatever, like, maybe Shaq was going to go to LA no matter what, but the Magic, it's been reported, didn't do enough to keep him, right? So those are like the analogs. Like, so to be clear, I didn't mean it like that.
I think the main one that you can point to, and I still don't know that it's arguably the same, but it's like Moses Malone signing an offer sheet with the Sixers, and the Rockets just choosing not to match it, is like.
And if you have to go back 40 years, that tells you something. Yeah. But or even I went back almost 30 years ago now. I think where I drew a parallel was, I think that was, look, I will add this, it's kind of relative. Like, the Mavs have already, for most of my lifetime, the Mavs have had one generational player on the roster, right? When I was growing up, they had Dirk, and then relative to that, I would argue that Luka's in that category. For the Knicks, we didn't have anyone like Porzingis come in, especially out of the draft, right? Melo was a trade acquisition. Most of, like, since really Ewing, in terms of a guy that was drafted here at kind of the Knicks' lowest point, he brought a lot of hope. And I remember the reactions that day from Knicks fans who just felt so hopeless, right? And over time it became, but it seems like I can draw a parallel there. It's not just about what KP does on the floor, because in that one it was much more understandable, right? The Mavs saying we didn't want to give Luka a supermax is different from the Knicks saying we don't want to give this guy who has had numerous injury issues 31 for 158 or 5 years for 158 or whatever it had been, which I think they were somewhat vindicated. He's become a really good player, but it was at that time for the next 2-3 years what he was going through. Both, I think, one is injury issues. Two, I think it's fair to say at this point a lack of maturity, which has resolved itself. But at the time, you just feel like it's it's more than just what he brings on the floor, right? And I think, again, you'd have to extrapolate a little bit because Dallas as a franchise has been much more successful for the Knicks in the last 25 years. So Luka for them would have been something like KP for us because we just hadn't had that guy really. So that's where I draw that emotional comparison. But in terms of like overall, like this is to me unprecedented really in NBA history. And I do want to throw this back to you, SJ. I think the last time we on the pod we talked about, we have to, this is a Knicks pod, right? So we talk about Brunson and stuff, and there's these teams have been intertwined a little bit for the last few years. The KP trade, and then we got Brunson. But they had KP, Brunson, and Luka on the team at the same time. And I was talking with, it was the Hot Hand Theory accounts. I don't know if it was XJ or Jeff. But the Hot Hand Theory posted that I don't think it would have really worked out in terms of synergy between those three. I think if you put those three on the same team right now, it actually worked out really well because I think all three have evolved their games. Like Porzingis, I think he's to his own point has admitted. I'm not calling him out for anything from just inferring. He has said that there was some ego and clash. Right, they were young guys. Him and Luka, in theory, should fit well together. I think if you put them on the same team together today, they'd be great. But at the time, it didn't mesh well because both kind of KP wanted to be in the post, Luka wanted to do his thing, and then Brunson just I think on the Mavs wasn't there yet, right? But if you take the Brunson now and have him play the Kyrie role, I think him and Luka would elevate each other's games. And is that just bad luck for the Mavs that they had these three guys, and if it was just a year or two later, it might have all worked out a lot differently?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head. Like attributing it not working to timing, because that's what I think too. I think it's the timing. Like I'm with you in that Porzingis and Luka at the time wouldn't have worked. Like even though it should have been a perfect fit on paper, it was just too much going on with the egos. And guys at that age, like I always say, your early years in the league, that's like stat pad season where you're kind of doing anything. Like usually your team, like even though you're trying to build something, you're probably not there yet in terms of being a contender. So it's just you trying to figure out your game, figure out like where you are, how you stack up in the league, and how you can get better. So Luka was like going through that phase, and KP was also in the middle of that phase. Luka, I guess, was just starting it, and KP was sort of in the middle of it. So it just wouldn't have worked. And then with Brunson, again, he didn't really blossom until that final year. Like I always maintain, I think Porzingis got quote unquote, like he wasn't as good to warrant some of the requests he had, like with all the post touches. Like at the time, he was not good enough to warrant the volume that he wanted. But I do think he could have been used a bit differently. Like I think they kind of gave up on him. And again, a little bit of it was injuries too. Like I think after all the injuries, Luka just did not trust him like on the court and off. So it kind of made for weird chemistry between them. And I do think he was it was just a weird synergy. But with Brunson, I never felt he was held back until the final year. I'll always maintain that final year where it was clear he could do more. And it's still like he got a little bit of the keys. Like obviously we made him a full-time starter that year. Prior to that, he was our sixth man. I still think we could have done a bit more with him that final year. But you can tell he was like on his way. And even with Porzingis and Brunson, they had better synergy than Luka and Porzingis. But at the same time, too, Brunson plays. It's not the same, but he plays a little bit like Luka. Like a little, like he has some Luka in his game where what Porzingis wanted to do, it just didn't mesh with how they wanted to play. Like we'd start the game every game with some Porzingis post touch. We try to get him, involved early, get him to feel, so we always called it Porzingis offense. So game would start, we'd run Porzingis offense, and he'd sit and we play like a completely different style. Like so it just didn't work in that way. But like you said, right now, I think with how all three of their games have evolved, like Brunson, I think, like I said, that final year, I think he was showing some real synergy with Luka, where I think he could play that Kyrie role like super well. And with Porzingis, he basically improved every facet of his game. Still has, his injury problems, but he's on a team that could, kind of, it doesn't matter like that he misses games, so he can kind of take his time over there. But overall, his game has grown so much. So yeah, now the bad luck that all of this, that they had all three, at a bad time. That's, you can't do anything about it. But yeah, now it's just in hindsight, seeing how everything is imploding. History is not going to be kind, especially seeing how Brunson is probably gonna have a couple more All-Star appearances, in his career. Porzingis, I'm not sure if he makes another one, but if Boston can win a few more rings with him on the roster, obviously that goes on his resume. So
hopefully not.
yeah, hopefully not. But I don't think history is gonna be too kind looking back to say, oh, you had all
Hopefully
three.
Brunson makes more than a couple All-Stars, by the way. We're hoping for a little more than that. So.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he'll probably make like 4 or 5 more, if that.
I think they, when you talk about like history's not going to look kindly on them, I think the main thing too is, to be honest, the Porzingis trade, like, look, I actually thought that final year that he was in Dallas, when I watched him, I was like, I know his 3-point percentage was super down that year, but when I watched him,
he was good that final year.
I thought
he was the best player. I thought he was, before he got traded. I maintained if we were sending somebody to the All-Star game, it should have been Porzingis, not Luka. Luka was awful the first half of that year.
And he was like moving better. You could see his post-up game was actually improving, which is probably down to the work he did with that assistant that he works with now. But like you could see it. So when they traded him, I wasn't so surprised they traded him, because I understood like they had like financial complications that they were working around. But I was surprised that they just basically salary dumped him. Like they more or less just salary dumped him. They did not get anything back. And then,
they gave up a pick.
Yeah, they gave up a pick. And if I remember correctly, that was Nico Harrison's first year on the job, right? So you can understand Nico Harrison trading Porzingis. I think like, yeah, maybe he didn't get enough or whatever, but you can understand the logic there. And I don't think people would kill him for that, given all the injury stuff that he dealt with and, whatever. The Brunson thing, though, is inexcusable. Like, that to me is the real, because your job as an executive is not just to make moves that you think are correct, but also to capitalize on opportunities where you can grab value. And they could, like, if they had offered, Brunson's talked about this, his dad's talked about this, if they had offered Brunson that 4-year, $55 million extension before his last season in Dallas started, he would have taken it. They went back and apparently told Nico, like, hey, like, we'll sign it now. It was before the trade deadline, and they did not want to do it because they signed the extension, then they couldn't trade Brunson. They couldn't use him as a trade chip at the trade deadline. Like, self-scouting is super important. Even if all you thought at that point in his career, prior to his final year in Dallas, was that he was a good sixth man, that's still worth that contract. That's still worth 4 years, 55, 56 million. So to not do that is super negligent. And then you paid the ultimate price, because what I will never buy, and was it already a done deal that Brunson was going to come here once it got past the trade deadline? Yeah, I think so. And not because he was so against going back to Dallas. They clearly messaged.
He had his dad as the coach too.
Right, but they had already started messaging they were not going to meet the dollar value the Knicks were going to put out there. So you're not even trying at that point. Because what do you say? You're telling him, stay for less. Also, we're not going to do everything for you the way that Leon Rose, your fucking godfather in New York, is going to. Like he would not, like. So you're not even making a competitive offer, and you want to say some of that's on Cuban? For sure, you can say some of that's on Cuban. But Nico Harrison is the reason it even got to that point. There's no way Mark Cuban was telling him in June, "Hey, don't offer Brunson 4 years, $55 million. Don't do that." Yeah, it's just ridiculous. And then now, so like we at that time, right, when Brunson walks, that 22-23 season for the Mavericks is like this disaster. Like it is like this train wreck. And at down the stretch of the season, they're like, all right, you know what? The season is fucked. They did the Kyrie trade that did not save the season. We're pulling the plug. We're going to try and tank and keep our pick. And, we'll do it. If you look at the moves they made, basically starting with the Kyrie trade up until they trade Luka, you can argue Nico Harrison was on this like unbelievable heater at that point. Every single move, other than like the Grant Williams signing, and they converted that into a successful move in trading that for PJ Washington. Every move was really good and helped bring them from a point where like it almost looked to a point like, did they just like close the window on the Luka era somehow? And it went from that to like, oh, we're in the NBA Finals, we're a contender, and it's just crazy to me to kind of track that, all of that, and to now be at this point where you commit the basically unforgivable sin of trading Luka Dončić. Like trading a player like Luka Dončić is the equivalent of like the Ravens trading Lamar Jackson. Like, Lamar Jackson's good, but we're gonna trade him for like Trevor Lawrence because we believe in his potential. Like, it just makes no sense. You
It'd
can't
be like
do that.
Stafford, I think, because of the age and stuff. But
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I was trying to better example. Either way, like it's so ridiculous, and it's actually insulting. Like NBA fans can see through this bullshit. Like I've never seen like propaganda PR being put out after a trade that is so transparently nonsensical that everybody from Mavs fans, NBA fans at large, whatever, are just like, dude, like your argument for making this trade is calling Luka fat. That's it. That's the argument. Luka's fat and AD is not, and therefore this trade is going to be great. Like, it's insulting. It's insulting. Like, don't lie to us. And just say that you think AD is the better player, because that's what it is. That's what it is. Like, Nico Harrison thinks AD is the better player. And if he didn't think that, then he wouldn't have settled for such a bullshit return in totality, right? This is not slander on AD. AD is a great player. I think it's actually been a little bit unfair on him how people have talked about him after the trade. But it's a ridiculous like, if I told you that before, if I told you the hour before the trade happened, I would I'm like, I think if I'm the Lakers, I'd offer like AD, Max Christie, and a first round pick for Luka. You've been like, dude, that's not even, you're not even in the ballpark. They're laughing at you. Like, and why would they ever trade Luka? And now we have also heard that they had shopped Luka, or at least talked to Milwaukee about trading Luka for Giannis. So you have like a thing here where clearly they want to trade Luka, but also to me, it's very bizarre that his primary concern in trading Luka was to get an older veteran front court player. Like, Giannis is amazing, right? He is an incredible player. He's, a top 1, 2, 3, whatever. He's in that conversation. But like, if let's say you get Giannis, what are you like? Giannis is going to play next to Lively. He's going to play next to Gafford. Like this, it just doesn't make any sense to me how you built this roster. And what made it so good is that Luka and Kyrie are obviously fantastic ball handlers, creators, but you could play big and you could play small. You could play with 2 bigs. You could play with 1 big. You could play 5 out at times. Like, you had all of those options. And now it just feels like you're very, very pot committed. And apparently you wanted to be pot committed to playing like double bigs all the time. And I'm not firmly against double bigs. Like, obviously we're seeing how skilled all these big men now are in the NBA, but just as a basketball decision, it doesn't make sense. Like, it just does not make sense to me on or off the court. And I say that while also believing there's a world where the Mavs, if they can ever get healthy, can still contend. But it's but you were already a contender. You were already contending. It's like you shortened your window to contend with the guy that you liked more. I don't know.
That's exactly what it was. Nico's problem is he made this all about himself. And he wants to win with his guys, but he doesn't realize we don't care. We want to win with our guys. We want to win with our guy. So you coming in, you inherited a superstar you clearly did not want. And I mean, it's funny how you had mentioned the timeline where you said he was on a heater of moves from, the Kyrie trade up until, Luka trade. But prior to that, I was not sold on Nico at all. I call him the shoe salesman. He's coming from Nike. I was like, oh, because that Porzingis trade, his first, because that summer he took over, summer 2021, we already kind of had, like, when we signed Reggie, all these people, those were already kind of predetermined moves from the old regime that were kind of already in place. So like you said, Nico didn't really have his first like real swing till that Porzingis trade where he had full reign to do something. I hated that trade. The minute it happened, I was very upset because I'm like, okay, we dumped him, cool, but he was playing, and I get it because at that point we had been trying to move him for a little bit, and with him being hurt and he was getting paid a max at that point, It just was no one would really bite. And by the time he looked better and we were still trying to shop him, I know the offers weren't great, but give up a pick and just dump him. And I hated Spencer Dinwiddie at the time. And then it was like Davis Bertans, who did not play in gutter Washington. It just, and we gave up a pick. That was it. I was very upset and I was not sold with Nico. But obviously we went on that run. So it was like, oh, all is forgiven. Then we get to that summer. He makes a series of mistakes with letting, Brunson walk, signing JaVale McGee to that awful, awful deal that we're still paying, by the way. And
really?
also and just doing and then trading that pick. Sorry, what was that?
The Mavs stretched JaVale McGee.
Yeah, we waived and stretched him last year, was it, or the year before? Yeah, we were paying him for like 5 seasons because of that BS. Yeah, and we also traded a first for Christian Wood. That summer was a disaster, and it was like, Nico, what are like? I was just not sold. And then he did the Kyrie trade, and then after that, it was smooth sailing. So he has a mixed bag. Like, you think it's a heater, but a lot of his moves, it's funny. Mavs Twitter has kind of they dissected it, but a lot of his moves are on accident. Like the Kyrie trade, he was just lucky that at the time it was just a shit show with Kyrie. That was really luck. That was luck. And then with moves like Derrick Jones Jr., Thibault was actually the plan A. Signing him to that offer sheet at $12 million. We just got lucky. Portland matched for whatever reason, and it was like, okay, Derrick Jones Jr. Again, we signed Grant Williams. Mistake. He flips it into PJ, which is fine. But PJ was not our first option. I don't know if people remember, we wanted Kuzma, and when Kuzma shut it down, it was kind of like, okay, let's go get PJ instead. So a lot of and then granted, this happens with a lot of executives. It's not just Nico. Luck is always involved, to a degree with some of these things, but it's really a mixed bag with him. And what I feel so, I guess, goofy about is that a lot of this was happening under our noses. Like that summer 2022 with Brunson leaving too. I feel like, again, they had a hard lining in the sand in terms of the dollar value they were willing to go up to, but I just don't think they were interested in keeping guys around that Luka liked. And that was the Casey Smith, who's by you guys now. How I don't know what he's doing over the director of.
He's like the fitness or whatever. Yeah, I know you're talking.
Yeah. But he's with you guys now. Don't know. I mean, I'm sure you guys are familiar with his resume. Always got very highly regarded around the league. One of the, they said best, trainers or, medical staff like available. And inexplicably, he gets demoted that same summer. And again, people outside of Dallas aren't going to be tapped in, especially to news like that. But it was very odd to everyone in the fan base. Mark Stein was reporting on it. It was just odd that it wasn't Casey's request. It was kind of contentious. And, we're trying to get extra information on what's going on. Like there was rumors, not public rumors, but the word is that they had a disagreement on the Grant Williams trade. Casey didn't think they should have done it because of some health concerns, and Nico did it anyway. So it was just a lot of contentious things going on. And obviously Luka was also very close with Casey, and Nico was just kind of cleaning house that entire summer in terms of personnel in the front office. And at the time, we just, as fans, we kind of just chalked it up to, okay, Nico came in, inherited a staff. He just wants his guys in. So we just kind of left it at that. But
I'm really familiar to what's going on right now, by the way. Just get rid of people without thinking about it.
Yeah, but it's just I just think I think he's been planning this, probably not in this exact way, but I think he knew as long as he was there, like in charge of, basketball operations for the Mavericks, I think he always knew it was going to lead to this, where he was going to move Luka. Even if it wasn't for AD, I think he was going to move it because he just didn't like him for, like you said, he just thought he was fat, this, that, and the third. And the worst part about this all is that, honestly, I truly believe that a lot of the concerns that they're raising, even though I think it's really tacky that they're leaking all of this, I think a lot of it is valid.
Yeah.
I truly believe that. I feel like a huge hypocrite. I'm gonna say it here because sometime in November, all the concerns that Nico all the reporting that's come out since the trade, and all the concerns that Nico had, I had literally verbatim those exact same concerns.
I remember they lost a game in Utah, and you were just like, Luka's fat ass needs to get in shape.
Yeah, I mean, people thought I was his biggest hater because I didn't hold the criticism back because I mean there's certain things to me, like certain like basketball philosophical things that he just did not meet for me, and it was always a struggle because it was like, okay, I also have this like tenured homer thing where if you've been on a team more than like 5 seasons, you're good with me. Like you're good. It's why, as much as Tim was so frustrating, Tim Hardaway Jr., another former Knick, I loved him. I don't care. I loved, he was here for so long. He's frustrating as he might be, he was our guy. That's how I kind of feel about Luka, even though there were certain things about him that it just wasn't passing the test, like my stupid, philosophical test. But at the same time, so that around that time in that November, I had some of these same concerns. My concerns is he ever gonna get in shape? Like, is he ever gonna take that seriously? And then defensively, in terms of how, like, what his role will be defensively and how it clashes with team building, where he needs to be like the low man, but that's an important defensive role, and he's not providing, all that, like the rim protection and certain nuances that are important for that role, but that's the role he needs to play because he can't do anything else. So it's like I had a lot of concerns, but that break, like having that, like him being out for a month, I found that to be a good simulation of what it would be like with life without Luka. And I came around to the fact that at the end of the day, one, he's our guy. I would rather win with him than without him. He's our guy. He's been here, 7 years. And then two, he's 25. You don't give up this early. Like, you just don't. So his frontal lobe just started working properly. It just got like, you wait a little bit. Like, like to do something impulsive right now. I came around to that in January, and it's just, life is so funny. He got traded literally a couple weeks later after I came around to the fact that, hey, you know what? No, he's our guy. So I don't want to be hypocritical in saying that I think all the concerns are just, them trying to trash him, and it's not valid at all, because I don't believe that. But one, like you said, how he went about it, it was cowardly. I have no respect for it. I always make the comparison, but Minnesota, when they shockingly traded Cat, to you guys, I respect them for having the decency to go to his house, look him in his face, and let him know, hey, you've been here for so long, but we're getting you out of here. That had to have been a tough conversation.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm pretty confident about this, but like, I think they had a conversation earlier in the summer, and it was like, if you're gonna trade me, I would like to go to New York. Like, that would be like a thing. So, but these are like the small things that it's always like, I think like NBA Twitter is like, they love to like make this out to be like, just be ruthless and like, don't treat, like, just make the right moves for your team. That's fine, but like, you're in an industry where you're going to work with these people over and over again, agents, other GMs, whatever. You have to treat people well, and if you don't treat people well, that shit comes back to you. And look, like, you're kidding yourself. Like, the way they treated Luka, and you forget how they treated him in terms of like communicating with him or lack of communication, but just look at the way NBA players were reacting in real time to finding out Luka got traded. Like, it tells you something. These guys are like, when you think about the history of the NBA, every era, every decade, 5-year period, whatever you want to say, they're defined by like a handful of guys. And Luka, whether not my favorite player, there's so many things about him that drive me nuts watching him play, but like, there's no world where you can't. Everybody knows that he is one of those guys. Like, he is a guy who is going to shape the league and the narrative around it and whatever. He's going to be a central player in that. To give away that guy, I guess, again, not give away, but I guess trade that guy at 25, like, not even in his peak. And yes, there are reasonable arguments to be made about the concerns about his lack of care over his body and all that type of stuff. I think that's all well and good. but you already have seen the level he can get to. Sometimes young players get, I mean, not just young players, but people in their 20s mature. That's how it works. And, you know, maybe he never will. Maybe it won't ever happen. But what kind of stood out to me, and I know I'm not making this. I forgot who talked about it or whoever did. I'm sure several people did. But like Joel Embiid is still on the 76ers. Zion Williamson is still on the Pelicans. Like these guys haven't even done what come close. They haven't even sniffed what Luka had already achieved in his career. And this was actually the first time that I think Luka had missed real extended
His
time.
first long-term injury.
So it's like to give up on him to sour on him and give up on him this quick is it's unprecedented. And I gotta say, like, Nico Harrison can sit here and he deserves all the criticism and get all the barbs and stuff. There's no chance in hell Jason Kidd was not cool with this. Jason Kidd had to be cool with this.
People are getting tricked. He is the Jason Kidd was all over.
He's like Varys, man. He's like Littlefinger. He's just like, yeah, you can tell. I mean, I'll put it this way. There's so many things about this trade that in the aftermath, looking back at it, that I refuse to believe that basically all the other major players, components, key figures in the trade were not already aware of it. Like the AD thing, where he waives his $6 million trade kicker, no problem. I'm like, you don't do that unless you already knew it was coming. There was no like he had to have known this is a possibility, or at least that this is a possibility. There's no way Rich Paul and LeBron had no fucking idea this was going to happen. Like, give me a break, man. LeBron, phenomenal liar. Another lie that I do not believe. Like,
you don't think he's read all those books that he just happens to be on the first page of every time?
The book thing is that was the one.
AJ Brown really read his books. That's why he won the Super Bowl. And LeBron,
the one where he had the Malcolm X biography, and I think Taylor Rooks asked him what his favorite part was, and he was just like, "Oh, you know, all of it, just all of it." I was like, "All right, man."
No, it was literally like Sarah Palin. They were like, "What do you read?" She's like, "You know, I like all these magazines. You know, yeah, guess I like them all."
But like, and then you like some of the quotes that Jason Kidd has been giving after the trade, where it's like you can kind of read between the lines. And even honestly, I gotta say, like the way Kyrie has responded post trade, like he's been really good and playing really hard. Like I just refuse to believe none of these people had any idea this was coming. And to your point, SJ, Kyrie is very much a Nico guy. Like that is his guy. I think he signed him when he was at Nike. They had a pre-existing relationship. He obviously trades for him. I think he has put together a team from the players up to, organizational staff, executives, coaches that are all his guys. And look, there's a value to bringing people you trust. There is a value to that. But when it gets to a point where, like what you're talking about, where it's almost like to bring in people you trust, you're alienating these people who are good at their jobs, right? And obviously Luka, but you talked about Casey Smith as well. You're alienating them because they're not like your guys. They don't have your stamp of approval or whatever. And that's bullshit. I mean, like it would be, Leon Rose came in, he hired a bunch of people that we all know that he had connections with, but it's not like he came in and was like, all right, now that I'm here, only people I know personally will ever get a chance here. It's and no organization that is run very well operates like that. And it's, I mean, I don't know. I just can't, like, I was telling SJ too, like before we started, but like every single day at some point, I'm like going through my day and I'm just like, man, they really traded Luka. Like that really happened. Like it's the craziest sports story I can. I mean, that trade happened the week of the Super Bowl, which Stacey, you know, very intimately. Like, and it overshadowed the motherfucking Super Bowl. Like, it was a bigger news story in the week leading up to the Super Bowl than the Super Bowl, which is unheard of. Like, it's
one way to boost NBA interest.
I mean, yeah, it's one that definitely did it. And then it's like then when the Luka trade happens, then apparently like everybody in the league was like, all right, fuck it. Like, this trade deadline is gonna be crazy now because we're just gonna let everything just let it happen. But yeah, I don't know. I gotta say, I want to get your thoughts on this, SJ, because there was that report after the Luka trade. I think it was Tim Cato and The Athletic that put it out there of like Dallas and Kevin Durant is a guy that they like. And, look, I think you would agree that if they are trying to compete, they do need another guy that can really fill it up. It just feels to me like, and we know KD is out of Phoenix after this season. This one just feels like, oh, well, KD, Kyrie, and AD was supposed to happen, but it never quite did. And now we're finally going to get the chance. It's like they're literally getting the Steve Mills, Scott Perry 2019 Knicks fever dream offseason potentially forming here. Like, but I think that's going to happen. I really do.
They're going to
but
try it. That's the plan. They're going to try it. They're going to try it.
I would just be like, it's just funny, like, thinking of like, even at their ages, that's a pretty sick top three, but it's also just funny to think of like, that's ultimately what you pivoted to from losing Luka, Brunson, and Porzingis to like these older, kind of like the past generation in some ways, stars.
I mean, this is why I'm also so angry at the trade, because you acknowledged in that god awful press conference that you do not care about the future. You said it out of your mouth. The future to you is the next 2-3 years. You don't care about 10 years on the line. You said that.
We're all going to be dead in 10 years. I was like,
right. So we don't care. But you are trying to do this all-in thing right now, which again, people aren't buying because we were just in the finals. So what do you mean? Like, you need to shake this core up. But anyway, they're going to try this, and despite all the evidence that we have in recent years that throwing away all your depth to build this old big three, emphasis on old, the old big threes, it just doesn't work. But he's gonna try it again because he wants his guys. And I mean, another piece of this, which is just so funny to me, that we haven't really talked about, is the fact that they didn't want to pay the supermax. And I mean, a piece of it's not that. I mean, I see people, again, conspiracy theories are just flowing out there. There are some people that are convinced that Nico is just like the fall guy, that it's just ownership being cheap and not wanting to pay. I don't think this is ownership wanting to be cheap. I just think it's Nico, which is completely ridiculous, seeing the fact that, hey, if we pay you all that money, it's probably going to become a bad contract. Similar to, I guess Embiid, you could say that's a bad contract, but it's still Embiid. You don't really refer to that, even though it is. You know what I mean? Like, no one really says, "Oh, Embiid's a bad contract," because
and he's 8 years older or something.
Yeah, and he's 8 years old, because when healthy, we know what he is. And again, that when healthy is holding a lot of weight with Embiid, but we don't say that. Even Zion, like, you don't say it's a bad contract, because when they play, they 100%, live up to it. They earned it. They qualified for it. So obviously they're going to ask for it. So with Nico, I don't think it's with them trying to build this big three with all, Kyrie's probably going to get an extension this summer if he doesn't leave. He's probably going to decline that, and re-up. And I think they're going to pay him handsomely. So he might not get like the full dollar max that he's eligible, but he will get in that 40 million range still. AD's obviously still on a huge contract. KD is making a lot of money. So I don't think it's them cheaping out. I just think it's Nico thinking it's going to be a bad contract for whatever reason, and knowing that they're not going to offer that. But again, be a man. Look him in the eye and say, listen, we're not going to give you that. I know you're going to ask for it. We're not going to give you that. And you go from there. You either work it out, put clauses in it, like, did you work it out that way, or because even if you put clauses in it, if he's like achieving it, then there's no harm lost. And if he's not, then he doesn't get the money. So it's just him wanting to win with his guys. Like, there's no way.
Is there kind of a risk though if you have that conversation and then Luka's like, all right, then I want out, and that becomes public, then that decreases your leverage? And I mean, again, they didn't get as much as they should have. So
that's why I can't buy it, because that's exactly what they wanted to avoid, but you didn't get a haul anyway. So it's like you're trying to avoid certain things, and you can't even say, even if he still wanted AD, because I believe that deal would have still been there in the summer if you really wanted him that bad. The Lakers aren't going to push their luck in terms of whittling it all, like just saying, oh, it's just we'll do a straight swap, just like a no picks. Like the Lakers aren't going to test their luck like that, because at the end of the day, look at the caliber of player we're talking about. you know what I'm saying? Like it's like, so even though you would lose quote unquote some of your leverage, it wouldn't be to the point where you're getting nothing. I mean, you already got nothing. So I don't like saying it like that, because again, AD is a really good player. Him himself, I see people saying, oh, he's worth like 3-4 first round picks himself, blah blah blah. That's not the point. The return was still pretty bad, to the point where what you got now, you easily could have gotten in the summer, even if your leverage was decreased with it being a public thing. You would have still gotten the same deal.
It's just like, to me, when all the stuff about the Supermax, what that tells me is that he didn't want to he did not want to commit to him. He did not, like Nico did not want to commit to Luka, and he knew that. He knew he was not going to offer him the Supermax, so he didn't even want to have the conversation. So he was like, because that's what he said in his press conference, where he was like, or maybe it was like one of the quotes he gave right after, but he basically talked about how we knew that was going to be a contentious negotiation or something. He said something along those lines.
Yeah, getting ahead of a tumultuous summer.
Right. And so when I heard that, I was like, okay, so what he's actually saying there is we were never going to offer him the Supermax, because that's the only way that situation becomes tumultuous, is if you don't offer him the Supermax. So they clearly were never going to do that. And he was like, okay, well, if I wait till the summer and that is like, then it becomes apparent I'll lose leverage. Okay. But like, why not just give him the Supermax? Like, it's just like, he's actually worth it. And I think whether Nico thinks, or I think, or you think, whatever any of these people think about Luka, at the end of the day, I guarantee you, if you sign him to a Supermax, you can't train him for a year, whatever, unless this guy has his leg get amputated, if you have to wait until the summer of 2026 to then be able to trade him, every single team in the league will be interested. Every single one will be interested. And forgetting that, I think it's just bullshit to have a team that goes to the finals. You rework some of the stuff on the margins, your rotation pieces. And when they were healthy, I mean, they were at one point in the season, I believe Dallas was 19-10. So like when they were healthy, they were really fucking good. And we already know they were really good based on their run last year, but you saw it again this year. And I think I was actually not super high on their offseason in general, but like then you saw, Najee Marshall really playing well. PJ Washington, not a fluke apparently. Like Daniel Gafford was playing, he's playing like the best ball of his career. Like you saw Lively obviously continue to his progression. You saw all this stuff coming together, and then you just pulled the plug on it midseason. Like to not give that group the opportunity to at least make another run. I don't know, just something about that specific thing is so grating to me. Like as a fan, forgetting the emotional part of trading Luka, I'd be like, yo, this team, we were in the fucking finals. Like, can I at least, like, so I'm never going to get to see this group again. I'm never, like, when was the last time Luka played for the Mavericks?
Christmas Day.
So, like, that's so, I don't know. Like, like I said, every day, I think to myself, like, wow, they really traded Luka. But this is stuff that, like, blows my fucking mind about this trade, where it's like, you have the emotional stuff as a fan, but then you also just have basketball reasons, and you're like, these reasons don't add up, and actually they're bad. Like, they're just not good reasons. And then again, you pulling the plug on this group that already had shown you they can at least get to a finals. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever see a trade like this. And hopefully, it's just like, I'll put it like when I heard that, when there was reporting that they had called Milwaukee about Giannis, as a pure basketball decision, there's a pretty reasonable argument to make that you should trade Giannis for Luka. There's a pretty reasonable argument to make there, just given the age difference and the fact that you're kind of stuck in the mud here in the middle of this attempted retool around Giannis. But Giannis has not asked out, and he has brought you a championship. It is the right thing to do to immediately turn that down, because he has given you everything that you could have ever asked for from him when you take him as, as a 15th pick and whatever. And yes, has Giannis gone in and flexed his muscles in terms of, we need to go get Dame, we need to this thing, we need that thing? Sure, he has. But he has always lived up to his end on the floor, and he has already delivered you a title. Like, we can talk about basketball as a business. In business, you should be rewarding and be loyal to people who have done well for you. And the way Dallas went about this trade, it feels just gross as like a sports fan. To me, it's just like
dirty is the word I've been using.
Yeah.
I feel, which is why I mean, I can't tell anybody what to do, and quite frankly, I don't care what anybody else is doing. I can only, live for myself. I don't really care what anybody else is doing. But for me, why in this current setup with this regime, why I don't feel like I can be a fan in the way I was before is I feel dirty. Like, the way how this was done, like, you don't do this. Like, even like I said, even if you try to find, again, it's very illogical as we've laid out here, but even if you go down the line trying to justify every piece of the trade, you can find a justification for everything. Again, even if it doesn't make too much sense, you could still find a justification for how everything went down, except how the message was relayed and how they did things. I just don't think there's a justification for that. You can't tell a man, to his face. Again, mid-season, didn't even give them a shot to go into the play. Like I said, this deal would have been there in the summer, even with the contention. It still would have been there. You would have still gotten this exact same deal, but at least you would have seen how it would have gone in the playoffs before you do something like this. But I mean, he wanted to do business like this, and again, you're coming into how things were handled after the fact didn't make anything better, because you're coming into press conferences laughing like shit is funny. You're trying to crack jokes. You're being very insulting, saying, "Oh, I'm not going to talk bad about people, but there's levels. People add to the culture." Like, what are you talking about?
That quote was fucking
what are you talking? Are we talking about the Dallas Mavericks that have had several? And this is the thing, like, my
Daryl Armstrong,
like,
guy.
My frustration has been a cumulative frustration. It's not just this one thing happened and I'm just done. I'm a ban. No, they've been on thin ice with me for a while now. And it's, what culture are we talking about? Like, you guys were the face of sexual assault across the league. Like, what are we talking about? It's just, and then Patrick Dumont, he's talking and he makes things exponentially worse by saying Shaq was the model of fitness and hard work and dedication. And you got Shaq on a podcast saying, "I never did such things. I was doing whatever." Like, you don't mention Dirk whatsoever. And to me, that statement or whatever interview, again, he only opted to do a solo interview with, I think, the Dallas Morning News. He didn't even want to do a full press conference. So again, they're all being cowards about the situation. And Nico saying for him to say he makes tough decisions, but you did all this to avoid a tough conversation, it's not clicking. And Patrick Dumont, which is why I don't think this was an ownership, like they were the masterminds of anything, because they don't know anything about basketball. Like, with him making all those statements, what it sounded like to me was that Nico played you. Like, Nico gave you, like, you laughed at him at first, but he convinced you in whatever way. He told you all this bullshit about Kobe, Mamba mentality, told you all this bullshit about Shaq that he knew wasn't true. And you're repeating it. You're basically his puppet. You signed off on it, because obviously no ownership group, if the GM is telling you, "Hey, a player that you might have to pay $345 million, we don't think it's worth it." Obviously, the ownership, even though Luka's great, obviously they're gonna be like, "Hey, if you're saving me money, some money." They don't know anything about basketball. They don't. So they would have signed off on anything. Again, if it was presented to them in a way that I guess made sense, and Nico did that. He sold it to them.
Yeah, I think what's also concerning to me, if I was a Mavericks fan, is that, like, okay, you want to trade Luka, and like the people that are like, oh my god, like they could have gotten an unbelievable haul for him. They could have gotten so like it's fine for me if Dallas has made the decision they want to trade Luka that they don't value draft capital because they're like, no, we want to compete now. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Okay, so you're trying to tell me the only possible trades you could make that you feel can still keep you as a title contender was Giannis or AD. That's it. There's no other option. Like you couldn't call because you're clearly okay trading him in the conference. You're not worried about that, blowing back on you. You couldn't call OKC and be like, hey, what would you say about giving us Jalen Williams, Hartenstein, a couple other young guys that we like on your team? Like you couldn't. I mean, I'm not even saying that objectively that is 100% going to be better than AD. What I am saying is, like, it just seems to me like there's more out there that you did not, that at least Nico Harrison does not seem to have even considered in terms of what can I get for Luka that can still keep us competitive and keep our title window open. And that would concern me probably just as much because that's the guy that I'm supposed to believe in his basketball judgment, his evaluation of talent, his evaluation and management of assets. Like it's not great. I don't buy that. I think if you're going to trade Luka, the only guys in the league that are not on the table for Luka Dončić are basically Jokic, Giannis, SGA, and that might be it. That's probably the full list. Maybe Tatum.
Leon pulls the trigger if Leon definitely pulls the trigger if we get offered Luka for Brunson, right? Godson or not.
I mean, yeah, that's one that would feel very disgusting to me. But like, if you're getting Luka, yeah, and Wemby's he might be a guy that you know. But like, yeah, it's again, it's like those are the only guys. Everybody else in the league. So like Tatum, I think they wouldn't trade because kind of goes to the Giannis point of like, nope, he's our guy. We want a title with him. That's it. Like we're not trading him. But like every other player is available. So you're trying to tell me of all the other players in the NBA, only two, like it was just AD that was like I don't know. It's
West is big, man.
It's nonsense.
But that's why you don't trade these. Like usually when you trade a player of this caliber, like we KD, dude that of his stature that I've been trading multiple times, that you don't see often. But usually teams, like I know teams always get a boatload of picks that might turn into something, but we always say, damn, the team that gave up KD kind of got robbed in the sense that it's KD. You can't really get that approximate value in terms of a player, which is why you don't trade these players, like unless, like you said, unless they're asking out and you're forced to. So if you're trading Luka thinking you can get a better player, you're talking about like 2, maybe 3 people, and obviously, like you said, those are 3 people that are off the table. So whatever trade you make, you're getting a worse player. And you're okay with that. But again, in Nico's head, AD is better than him for whatever reason. I don't know how, if he's making that evaluation based on just defense. I just don't know what to tell him. And it's very worrying, like you said, that this is the guy in charge of basketball operations for a team. Because you cannot point to anything in 2025 that shows that AD is a better basketball player than Luka. Like it's just not there.
AD adds to the culture.
What? AD adds to the culture.
I said AD adds to the culture.
It's also very unusual to see when you do see these trades, right? Like KD or I'll bring up Porzingis or Ingram or whoever. I mean, these are lesser caliber players, but these kind of players don't get traded. But if they do, it's usually a team is like, we're not contending, right, with this player. They are going to want to leave. Let's get what we can for them and let's start over, right? You don't usually see this kind of a 1-for-1 and change, right? Because, like even a guy like Anthony Davis, if Luka wasn't on the table, wouldn't be available for most teams, right? That just, especially given the Lakers timeline. So, it's very unusual to see like that like this player versus this player being traded much in any sport, right? I remember like Champ Bailey got traded for Clinton Portis, and that was weird because like you never see like a 1-for-1 trade like that. And that's what happened here. And it's it doesn't meet any of the criteria, right? Because usually it's a team's like, we've gone as far as we can go with this guy, that which isn't very far. Let's cut it. That wasn't true for Dallas. And they're also not tearing it down. They're like, no, and like for what it's worth, they can contend with Kyrie and AD, but we're seeing now, I mean, I don't know if AD is out for the season or what.
He's out for the season. They just don't want to tell people.
AD he'll be out with something at some point, no matter what. So
I don't have like any hopeful optimism left for there's no world they can get me to pretend that AD and Kyrie is winning a championship. You cannot get me to pretend like that's going to happen. So you not only ruin the future, you cook the short term too. Like, yeah, we can contend, be cute little dark horse, contenders. That you're not going to get me to pretend like Kyrie, number one perimeter creator on a team, is going to work out for an entire playoff run. You're just not going to convince me that that's going to work. You just can't.
So you don't think Dwight Powell can carry the Mavs to title contention?
Like Lively's probably out till the end of the season as well. Like if he comes back, it's probably around like the end of the season, maybe the beginning of the playoffs. Gafford is out till, I think Gafford might also be out for the rest of the season. Like given the amount of games that we have left, I think if he comes back, it might be like 1 or 2 games left, like in the season. Like just given the time frame, like. These are important guys with like borderline season-ending injuries. What are we talking? Kyrie has a bulging disc in his back. Like, what are we talking about?
And with Lively's so young.
A Lakers fan, and he was sad. After the trade, one of the first things he texted me was, "It sucks to lose Christie," which shows how spoiled Lakers fans are.
Lakers fans can go to fucking hell. Okay, I don't want to hear anything about.
I do like Christie though. I'll say that.
Yeah, I like Christie. You got Luka Dončić. I don't want to. That's
what I'm saying. I don't want to hear about Max Christie. I don't care.
I do not care about Lakers fans. These motherfuckers. Okay, they've had Shaq, Kobe, Jerry West, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, fucking. Like they've had 55 fucking Hall of Famers. They have LeBron. Like every 5 to 10 years, the NBA gifts these fucking assholes like a face of the league. So I don't want to hear about Lakers fans and their emotional loss with AD going out the door. Give me a fucking break, all right? The other, like when you were talking about Lively, the other thing too with him is he's young. So I wouldn't want to rush him back because we have a chance to do something this year. Like, I want to be careful with that guy because he needs to matter to me for like the next 5, 6, 7 years, unless this offseason he decides,
he's gone too. He's not safe. He might be gone to Phoenix. I hope he enjoys Arizona.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Derek Lively, I love you. You're going to Phoenix, buddy. I'm not going to tell you that though. You'll find out when I call your agent. But yeah, like it's just the whole thing is so weird. I don't know what to say. All right, let's move on from the Luka Dončić hour here. Let's get back to some more fun stuff. The New York Knickerbockers, who are 36-18. Have you been keeping up with the Jalen Brunson in New York and this year's team?
Yeah, I've watched not as much as last year to this point, but I have watched a good amount of Knicks games.
I'm curious about this. So you obviously they played the Timberwolves last year in the playoffs, the Mavericks. So you got to see Karl-Anthony Towns in a playoff series. He played both the 4 and the 5 in that series. Me and Stacey have talked about this. I've brought this up a few times. One of my main concerns with Cat, and he's been phenomenal offensively. Obviously, we know the defense is what it is. But going specifically to his offense, he's, most players are playoff droppers with offensive efficiency and all that stuff. He has been that. He's still like a 58 true shooting guy in the playoffs, which is not bad. I'm curious, when Dallas played them last year, did the Mavericks make it a point to like sit on his right hand when he catches the ball on the perimeter? Because what I have been I don't want to say I'm super concerned about it, but like we've talked about all year, like Cat is this, he's a fucking phenomenal shooter, but he doesn't shoot enough. Like he prefers to drive. And that's fine, but I also don't think he's like a very diverse driver. He doesn't have an in-between game. it's all like very right hand dominant. Is that something that you noticed in that series, or am I maybe totally off on that?
It's funny you bring that up because the issue with him, or one of the issues with him in that series, one, his shot was off.
Yeah, he was terrible.
He got good looks. I would say he did get some good looks from three. He just couldn't hit anything, and he did try to drive. And it's funny you mentioned his driving game is very mechanical. I would say he kind of has one way of doing things, but we packed the paint on him. So once he got by, like he would get by PJ a good amount of times. Like he would get by some of our guys, but once he got to the rim with the bodies we had, because we were mainly using kind of PJ on him at times, so he's facing Lively, Gafford in the paint. So he was getting his shit sent a lot once really like once he got in the paint. And again, they're a little
when he played with Gobert and without Gobert, or
both actually.
So even when he was the 5, you're putting
when he
PJ
was the 5, yeah, he pretty much got blocked a lot. And then again, there's Stinger with the whistle in the playoffs. So he might have been getting fouled a little bit here and there, but they're not calling all of it. So he's just puts up wild attempts sometimes. So I just think he played a lot of 4 in that series too, because we really torched. If it was Cat at the 5, Nas at the 5, we torched those lineups. Yeah. So him offensively, I just think again he was playing out of position. So I don't think that series, especially since he played pretty well in the Denver series, I don't think that's a good series to I guess judge him on, just because he was playing so out of position, and we were more versatile than Denver with the lineups we could put out to kind of counter some of those things.
And their best creator was Ant, who is super talented, but is not the most high level processor or reader.
Exactly. Yeah, we packed the paint on him, and I would say he had a decent passing series. I think he averaged maybe 7-8 assists. So
yeah,
he had a decent passing series, but it wasn't as I guess fluid is probably the word I'm looking for. It wasn't as fluid and I guess natural, like in terms of when we sent bodies to him making constant right reads, and they're getting the ball or putting the ball in rotation. It wasn't as fluid for Ant.
Yeah, well, and his defense in that series was an abomination. He was so bad.
It was terrible.
I mean, obviously, so having seen that, and then you've seen him in New York now, you've also obviously seen Brunson for many years as a Maverick and now the Knicks. How do you feel about the likelihood of this Knicks team finding a way to contend with both these guys in the starting lineup? And do you think that ultimately it's on the Knicks, if there is a path, it requires them to get a specific type of front court player to play next to Cat? Because I think the Mitchell Robinson, he'll come back. We'll see how healthy he is, if he can stay on the floor. I think that's a versatile look. I think that's a useful look. But I still feel like you need to find a way to still be 5 out and have somebody next to Cat that can kind of protect him at the rim defensively. Obviously, the list of players who can do that is very small. But do you think that is what it will ultimately require to make a lineup with Brunson and Cat be able to compete at the highest levels?
Yes, because I'll be honest, I'm not a believer with Cat at the 5 in terms of championship hopes. I just think it's borderline hopeless in terms of a defense with him at the 5 without, like you said, somebody next to him in that front court really anchoring him. It's kind of reminiscent of Jokic. So it's funny. Before he won, I guess a couple, so like around the bubble, right after the bubble, I was skeptical of Jokic winning a championship in Denver with the current, or that then current setup of their team, because they were trying with Michael Porter Jr. being being the guy next to him at the 4, and we know about MPJ's defense, how it's not the strongest there. And I'm like, with Jokic, you really need a 4 that's gonna really protect them, and I didn't think MPJ was that. So I just didn't think it was gonna work out for them. And then they got Aaron Gordon, which changed it a lot for them. So what I think you guys need is that Aaron Gordon type player. I mean, OG is pretty good, but he's not that type of four. He's not really a four to me. He can play small ball four, but he's not
a rim protector. Like
yeah, he's not the rim protector and the rebounder, like, can get on the boards. Like, he's not that type of physical player. And the list is very, again, that I've just been saying this for years. It's something I've actually been tracking for like years. That four position, it's just so important. Like in today's NBA, like you need that guy that can like that Swiss Army knife, physical, that can like rebound, provide some of that, rim protection, and even more so for the fives that are kind of shaky on that end. You need a super, version of that. So it's to name players that you guys could realistically get that could fit that mold is a little difficult.
So can I do my Windhorst? Can I do a Galaxy Brain Windhorst? Okay, so the Knicks obviously had 2 representatives at this weekend's All-Star game, which was awesome. What an advertisement for the sport. They had 2 representatives at the All-Star game, Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns, who are both CAA clients. Leon Rose is a CAA guy. Who else is CAA that was there that they were palling around with? Jaren Jackson Jr. They're palling around with Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, Jaren Jackson Jr. has a year left on his contract after this. The Grizzlies specifically traded Marcus Smart to try and do a renegotiate and extend with him after the season. Now, kind of awful for them. The other thing, when Leon Rose was first hired, he hired Jaren Jackson's dad to work in their G League outfit. Now, obviously, the Knicks do not have any picks, or they have a couple picks, but not good picks to send out the door. I also don't think Memphis would be interested in getting picks. I don't think they want picks. They're not trying to rebuild. They want to win. But if I'm Jaren Jackson Jr., I might look at that team and be like, look, these players are great. My GM, his only big move that he's made my entire career is trading for Marcus Smart. And that trade was so bad that we had to trade a future first to get off of this contract. My owner does not ever want, he's mortified of paying the luxury tax. Absolutely mortified of paying the luxury tax. Is this a team that is truly committed to winning, or are we just happy being nice and 50 wins, 53 wins, competitive in the West, but not really pushing the chips in to win a championship? I don't know. I'm just saying it didn't seem like nothing is the best way I could put it. And the fact that they did hire his dad at one point in time, I don't know. The Knicks do have good players they could send to Memphis, or maybe to another team to send Memphis whatever they want. I think it's something to keep an eye on, is the way I'd put it, because he is one of the few players on that list of can play the 4, gives you elite rim protection, and obviously he still can spread the floor for you. Obviously he's not like the greatest shooter ever, but he's a good shooter enough that you have to respect him out there. That's a pretty interesting one for me. Is it possible? I don't know. The odds are always against you acquiring a top talent like that, but it would not be the craziest thing in the world to me. Like we talked about with Luka, if Jaren Jackson Jr. goes to Memphis's front office this summer and they're like, hey, we want to do a renegotiate and extend, and he's like, that's great. I do not want to do that, actually. I want to play out my contract and we'll see what happens at the end of the year. Like, then he might be able to start, if he flexes his muscle, how many markets, how many teams is he, kind of open to staying with? That would be an interesting discussion point for me. Obviously, we're very far away from that. The Knicks are good. They're going to have to deal with stuff in the playoffs. Memphis is good. They're going to have to deal with stuff in the playoffs. We'll see what those team situations look like in the summer. But I don't know, Stacey, I'm curious, like, is Jaren Jackson Jr. basically the guy that comes to mind if you're thinking about a 4 to put next to Cat?
No, the guy that came to mind, and I'm not sure if this works with timeline or just having to deal with who he is. The first guy that came to mind when SJ was talking was Draymond as like the perfect next to Cat guy.
So
but you said
so he can bully Cat in person every day.
It would be very interesting. But you're
Punch
talking
Cat in
about,
the face.
you use the word Swiss Army knife, can protect the rim, rebounds well. With Jaren Jackson, I think that'd be really exciting. If I was Memphis, I would ask for OG, and I'm not sure I'm willing to do that. And by that I mean no, I wouldn't do that unless JJJ took a leap this year. It doesn't solve they don't have problems on the glass, so maybe that's fine. And Hart is a great rebounder. It's not like OG is a great rebounder either. But from a talent perspective, if you can get that for just because Memphis is cheap or because he wants out, and you can get him for like first or two.
What if it's Mikal Bridges?
It's a little bit more palatable than OG, but Jaren's had some injury issues too, hasn't he?
Yeah, he has. He's been better though.
He's been healthier the last couple seasons. Yeah.
And so I think he's also playing like. I know Ja's like always going to kind of get the shine over there, but Jaren Jackson Jr. has been by far their best player this season.
Oh, by far. And they've treated him as such in terms of touches, all that. They've treated him like he's the guy.
Yeah, I mean, with Bridges, I do think it matters that he's very healthy. I am kind of I would be worried about, like, the thing is that Knicks haven't leaned as much. I think you've talked about this a lot, Schwinn, into Bridges as a secondary creator. I would like to see more of that, and you do lose even that hope. Jaren's been doing more on the glass, or doing more creation this year. They've been running more stuff for him, so maybe that gives you another outlet. Don't know if I trust Tibbs to that, but if it's there for a reasonable offer, Bridges might be the Mendoza line. You'd try to get under that if you could do like Deuce, Mitch. But they don't have access to picks, right? So that also becomes tough. So I guess you'd have to hope that the Memphis is really into Mikal Bridges and go from there.
Well, I mean, I think I can't say this for sure, but I'm pretty sure that Memphis did at one point offer like 4 first-round picks from Mikal Bridges. So I think they would like Mikal Bridges. He is a two-way wing that obviously. Sorry, did I just freeze? I think I froze. But yeah, like he's a two-way wing, obviously that Memphis has or would have in this scenario. He has his own contractual situation coming up. I would suspect that Mikal Bridges might be more open to just taking a max extension, regardless of where he was, than somebody like Jaren Jackson Jr. I think some of the shine, rightfully so, has come off of Mikal Bridges, in the sense of like, in some ways, I hate talking about the trade for him because I think like, yeah, we gave all these first round picks, but you didn't give up a player at all, which is like the thing that often happens in these trades. You didn't give up a real player for him, so that's kind of why you have to give up the picks. But because of that steep price the Knicks paid to get him, I think there's been a lot of focus on him, and he's very good, but he's not like the greatest wing player of all time. So I think there were times previously in his career where the way he was being talked about was like somewhat insane. There was a point where it was like, well, is Mikal Bridges just better than Kevin Durant now itself? Like, did the Nets have the craziest trade haul ever? Obviously that didn't play out, but yeah, I don't know. It just stood out to me because I was like, I don't know. It's like they're all CAA. I know Leon clearly. Like, you don't hire his dad just because like you're a nice guy. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I think that he's somebody who they have had their eye on in the past as a potential option. Is it possible they do it this summer? I have no idea. I mean, the odds are against you, but he is. I think you're going to get to the playoffs, and I think the Knicks will play Boston or something. And we will see that, like, if you're going to make this Karl-Anthony Towns at the 5 thing viable at the highest ends of basketball against the best teams, you need somebody who's more of a athletic, rangy, rim protecting 4 than you have available on your roster right now. And when you come to that conclusion, like, yeah, Jaren Jackson Jr. is somebody who makes a lot of sense. But to your point, Stacey, Draymond would be, Draymond is like, I've had so many thoughts about Draymond on the Knicks, like over years, because there are things that he's obviously fantastic at, but then there's stuff where I'm just like, I can't stand this fucking guy. He's an asshole, and I'm like, I couldn't believe the shit he was saying yesterday. He's talking about like the game's just boring now. I'm like, is it boring now because you have no chance of actually contending for a title? Is that boring for you? But he still can play at a very high level. And to your point, like there's the defensive stuff with him, like he's just still an elite defender. He still is. You can see some of the plays he makes when he's on the floor. They played who was it right before the break? I forgot who they played. Whatever, it doesn't matter. But he was Houston. They played Houston, and he was unbelievable in that game defensively, like truly just dominant. And he would be an interesting option. I mean, I don't think he's ever going to get traded from Golden State. It feels like he's a made man over there, and ownership loves him, and he loves being there. So I don't see that happening. But I mean, look at the players we're talking about, though. This speaks to the point. Like the list of players that I think you need to be able to get one of is limited. There's not many of those guys. So how will they do it? I don't know. But that is ultimately, I think, the question they have to answer if they want to make this work. If not, I think they might reach a point in a year, 2 years where they're like, Cat's been great. Cat's awesome. Cat's going to help us win 50, 55 regular season games every year. But if we want to win a championship, we have to we have to move off of him. I think that's a reasonable place they might end up.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still pretty early.
It is. I'm just thinking, I'm like more voicing some long-term thoughts I've had.
I'm, to be honest, more than the thing is this though, right? Even if you get that 4, like even if you get Draymond, right? We've seen this with the Celtics, right? They still, like, even what I worry about, even if we get Mitchell Robinson there, right? And he takes away some stuff on offense, a team like the Celtics can still target Cat. They did last time because everyone can screen on their team, right? So you hide Cat on another player, they will use him in the screen action. So I think it really does come down to a referendum on Cat. Like, can he function better in that defense? He did in Minnesota, right? But again, not against Dallas, right? 4 or 5, right? I mean, I'll there's the US shit, because Dallas last year especially was probably the closest thing to, it's obviously a different scheme and all that from Boston, but they go 5 out a lot. Obviously couple of talented creators. One is a wing, kind of who's with size, right? Elite pick and roll players. Did you think that, like, yeah, Cat is great at the 4, especially next to Rudy most of the time, but there are certain teams that are still going to be able to attack him, particularly late in the playoffs?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's kind of I mean, I do not like tweeners, quote unquote, like guys that and I mean, Cat at this point, he's a 5. It's just that, he struggles to kind of defend at the 5. He's a tad better at defending at the 4, but he's a guy where he doesn't fit cleanly defensively at the 4 or the 5. Like, he has his warts in both roles. It's similar to Christian Wood, where I hate Christian Wood. I will just put that out there. If you follow me, my years long beef with Christian Wood. But one of the issues that I had with his game is that tweener thing where he, at the 5, he can play a little bit more freely offensively, but just can't defend anything. And at the 4, a little bit better, but because he can provide that, secondary rim protection. But the issue is some of the matchups he just cannot defend at the 4, and I think that's Cat, where a little better at the 4, but there's just some matchups that it just isn't gonna work out for him. And I think there's a couple matchups around the league, like that. Like, for example, if you guys were to, let's say, you make it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, you see Boston. I wouldn't be confident in the Knicks in that matchup, largely because of Cat, where I just don't think he fits cleanly at like 4 or 5 in a matchup like that. I think you get exploited. I don't think there are I think there are more teams that wouldn't be able to exploit the matchup than teams that would be able to exploit the matchup. So I think you have that going for you. But I do think just because he can't fit cleanly defensively in one of those roles, that you're gonna come across a good amount of teams that can exploit it.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of a philosophical thing. It's like if you don't have a good rim protector at the 5, is that worse because they can be attacked in pick and roll? Or is it worse because everybody else is, because they can't help, right? Like, what's the most important role for a big? So is it because, yeah, Mikal Bridges and OG are great perimeter defenders, they're still going to get beat. There's nobody who is immune to getting beat. I don't care if you're, Lou Dort or any of these guys in the Thunder.
You just watch Brunson fucking fry Dyson Daniels, and he's a phenomenal.
Yeah. So I'm curious, do you think, because I think if you think that it's really not just because at the end of the day, if you just attack someone one-on-one, that's not even what Boston wants to do. They can do it, and they cooked Cat the last time we played in pick and roll. But you don't want to just have Tatum ISO even on Cat every possession, right? That's especially a team like that would love to just move the ball and get everybody involved. So if the idea is that the real issue is that you don't have anyone on the back line that can provide support, that's where I think the idea of playing a 4 next to Cat in trying to get one of those guys, even if you have to pay a premium, like giving up Bridges or, if you, there's other guys, I think, I'd be curious what a guy like Derek Jones Jr., especially with how well he's playing, might take that role. I think it lends more hope to me that like that's a palatable option. If you think that that's the most important thing, it's help defense. And like, if he's not great in pick and roll, whatever, but like, it's the fact that he can't help that just reduces the margin for error for everybody else to 0.
I think like in general too, like you've got to do more. So I agree with Ashley that Cat's defense, it is what it is. Like he's not a good defender, and that's just the reality of it. If you trade for him, you can't trade for him. And I'm sure the Knicks did not think like, well, he's going to become good here. Like I'm sure that they knew, okay, look, like he's not going to be a great defender. We have to find ways to work around this. So you have to accept that. Once you've accepted that, then it becomes about, okay, well, how do we kind of mitigate this to the best of our abilities? And to that point, in these matchups against, I mean, not just simply down to these games, but when you play Boston, we've played OKC, I think there needs to be more done from a coaching and tactical perspective of like, okay, let's not just allow them to bring Brunson and Cat into the action together. Like you can do more in terms of pre-switching, how you defend the pick and roll, right? Like we've seen the Knicks just get fried because they're just like, we're going to play drop, we're going to play drop, we're going to play drop, we're going to play drop. And it's like, one, Cat's a terrible drop. He's a terrible drop pick. It's his worst coverage as a defensive anchor. And second, like it's not even always about an effort or execution thing, although it is sometimes about those, but he also is like, he's not good at getting any kind of vertical lift when he's backpedaling. That's why when like you see guys finish through him at the rim so often, right? Like you see guys overpower him at the rim because he just is not able to gather himself and contest effectively. So, yeah, I think like you can do stuff to mitigate, but I and this is kind of where I've been really even before the season started, is I don't think they have the total group here in place that's going to actually win a title. I think they're close. I think they're very good, but they're in this like, and I'm sure contributes to some of kind of like the overwhelming negativity you can see at times after the Knicks lose a game, especially, after the Boston game or after the OKC games. And those games were obviously debacles, but like the Knicks exist in this place where they're clearly very good, but it does feel like they're here and Boston and OKC are little like they're above. They're above them. And how you make up that gap, I mean, that's the hardest one to figure out in the NBA, making up that final margin. So we'll see what happens, but I will say, like, I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't even get a chance to talk about this much with Prez. That Brunson performance, I've watched it now multiple times. The end of that Hawks game, the shit he was doing, like, you're just going 1-4 flat there. You've got Precious and Hart on the floor. The Hawks are not respecting those guys at all. So they're just standing, with 1 foot in the lane. He's on an island against Daniels. And yeah, he had a couple of turnovers, but like that is like it's unbelievable. I think how he's progressed as a shot maker, offensive kind of force at this point. Where I mean, how many guards in NBA history can go up against wing defenders every single night and every single night produce at the level that Brunson does as a scorer? Like he is,
And that was
I mean,
his flaw
yeah,
in Dallas, like or his early days in Dallas. Put any length on him, he couldn't handle it.
and we've seen him at times like I mean, look, he like good offensive players are gonna find ways to torch good defensive players, and the same can happen the other way around. Like a good defensive player can have a good game on a good offensive player. So we've seen at times Brunson struggle against like we've seen it with Dyson Daniels. I thought one of his worst games of the season was that cup game they played at the Garden, and Daniels completely turned off his water. Brunson did not have it that night. But like this guy, I don't know, man. He's just special to me because every single fucking time you think, oh, this guy figured him out. This guy figured him out. This guy figured him out. And it's like, he just comes back and he's like, no, I figured it out now. Like Amen Thompson. Amen Thompson had him in hell when we played Houston early in the season. Had him in absolute hell. I think that was one of the Knicks' lowest point totals of the season. I want to say we scored 97 points as a team. We played them a couple weeks ago at the Garden, and Brunson just destroyed him. He destroyed him. He destroyed Tari Eason. He destroyed Dylan Brooks all in the same game. 42 points. Like, I mean, this guy is what he's doing at his size. Even for somebody like you, I mean, you were talking about how you kind of saw him developing, taking the leap in his final year in Dallas. Even that, like, you've got to say though, at the point he's reached now, you're like, that's like I did not expect. I did not expect.
I didn't see that. No, I didn't see that. I knew he'd be an all-star. Like before, it was apparent he wasn't coming back. I thought we had an all-star backcourt in Dallas. I was saying it. I was like, very next season we're going to have an all-star backcourt, even in the West. I believe he was gonna take that leap to all-star. I didn't see this. I didn't see all NBA. I didn't see all NBA caliber.
But yeah, it was just I don't know. It was just such a. It was a weird game because you're like, why the hell are we playing a 149, 148 game with the Hawks in overtime? But within that insanity, I just thought his performance at the end was like, I mean, it's honestly mesmerizing because Dyson Daniels, I gotta say, like he's one of the best perimeter defenders in the league at this point, and I mean, I don't even feel great about saying like Brunson torched him because on so many of these shots, Daniels is there. Daniels is doing as well as you can, but this guy is just like capable of these moments and games and stretches where it's like it doesn't matter how good your defense is. I can score, and it's obviously there are a lot of great players throughout NBA history who've had that kind of ability. We see that in the league now. Like Luka obviously has that ability where it's like it doesn't really matter who you have on him. If he has it going, you're screwed. But the guys of Brunson's kind of physical stature, he's not obviously some high flyer either. For him to be as good and as dominant of a scorer, offensive player as he is, I mean, it's rare. The list of guys in NBA history is at his size to be able to play at that level and do that is very limited, very, very limited.
Yeah, and I think part of it is kind of what you mentioned. It's like it does seem like we've seen him struggle at times throughout his Knicks career, right? I mean, even going back to Dallas, right? Like, wasn't the knock on him before that he wasn't getting the playoffs? That's why they were hesitant to give him among other reasons.
That Clippers series was bad for him.
Yeah, the Clippers series was bad. I mean, most people at the time, including myself, like I wasn't thrilled about offering him that full max directly after that series. That series was that bad.
Yeah, but he now has become one of the better playoff players, and he's a playoff riser at this point, right? We've seen him have trouble with wings. We've seen him figure out on the second meeting, right? It's kind of a microcosm of his career. It's like the football. I mean, it is very rare, to your point, especially for a player who's not super athletically gifted, right? I think he's quicker than people give him credit for. But this is not a jump out of the gym athlete. He's probably generously 6'1", 6'2". listed. But I think the guy just learns and gets better continuously. And I don't think there's ever a game, like even when he has a bad game, I don't think it's a wasted experience for him because He learns from his mistakes. He gets better every time, and it's a scary thing to contend with, and it's really advantageous, especially in that 7-game format. We saw in the Miami series, first game of the series, he was horrible, and we lost that series, but he finished that series out against a pretty great defense, 31, 38, and 41, despite being hamstrung by some questionable lineups as well. So the question is really, the issue is, the two teams especially that you look up and you say, the Knicks, might not have enough, even with Brunson playing that well. Each has that guy, right? Boston had, Tatum did that to the Knicks last time. I'm not saying that the Celtics necessarily needed that, but Knicks came back to within 3 points. Fell back a little bit. Boston get ahead in a minute, and then it was Tatum just hitting absurd shit to close them out. And of course, we know what SGA can do. So I think it just shows, especially with the second apron and all that, like you need that guy and you need more in today's NBA, and that's what kind of makes it. As much as everyone has been complaining about how boring the NBA is now, it's kind of what makes it fun, because the level of the threshold for building that team is a lot higher. You need to be able to beat a lot. Like Boston might have its Achilles heel. Something like Cleveland might be Boston's Achilles heel. Who knows, right? Oklahoma City looks like they might be the best team in the league. Maybe they run into LA.
Spida is not going to be anybody's Achilles heel, right?
No, but it's a very complete team, and they have the defense to kind of slow things down, right? It just takes running into one team that's the wrong matchup. I think in the West that's even more true. And I think that makes the league a lot more exciting. But in terms of, I don't want to rehash old conversations that we've talked about a lot. In terms of, can Brunson be that guy as your top option in a playoff series? Offensively, I think there's no question.
Yeah, no, I haven't really had that concern since the Miami series, to be honest, because once I saw that, I was like, okay, I've seen quite enough here. It's the one thing I guess that we don't know yet is, it's one thing to show you have that level. It's another thing to do it for 4 rounds, right? That's the real challenge, because the playoffs are grueling, and your minutes are going to go up as a starter, obviously. And we saw at the end of the Indiana series, obviously, like the Knicks' entire season last year was so weird given all the injuries, and then you really had to put your pedal to the metal, right, or really kind of push it towards the end of the regular season to keep that number 2 seed. And then you have to play these guys major minutes because you're shorthanded in the Philly series and you're shorthanded in the series. So him running out of gas last year isn't that concerning to me. And I think there's just stuff that went on as a team that kind of makes it understandable. But we haven't seen him yet do it for 3 rounds, right? We haven't been to a conference finals. We obviously haven't been to a finals either. So that's really the only concern I have is, can he do it for 4 rounds? I know he can do it for 2, but I don't know if he can you go that extra 2 months, right? That's what it is. It's 2 months after the regular season. That's really, really challenging. And, we'll see obviously how that plays out. But yeah, as far as like the league is boring thing, I just don't understand this conversation at all. I really don't, because, and I'm not somebody who, like, I don't love that the game that, we've all been Missoula'd and everybody has to take 7,000 threes. Like, I don't love that in its entirety, but it's kind of insane to me to think, if you're really watching the league, like if you're watching the league, do you think every team is generating threes in the same exact way? Like, that's the part that I don't get. I'm like, the output can be the same thing, but how teams are generating these shots, how they're playing is so different. Like, Denver does not play the same as Boston, who does not play the same as the Knicks, who do not play the same as, whatever. Like, you can keep going on and on, but all these teams have their own styles of play. And the only consistent thing, and this has been consistent throughout NBA history, is you figure out who your best player is. If your best player can be, and then you build it around that. And like, however you do that has to change depending on your best player. Like, the Knicks can't build the same way around Brunson that Oklahoma City can around SGA or something like that. Like, they're all unique players. They all have their own idiosyncrasies that are good, bad, whatever. You have to deal with that, and that's what makes team building unique. So yeah, I don't understand that conversation at all. It's just weird when you have like current guys in the league saying this shit. Like, why are you saying this? Like Draymond Green is saying this, and it's like, oh yeah, the league was better back in the day. It's like, oh, when you were winning championships. Okay, I get it. Like, so the league is better when it's good for you. But now that it's not, everything sucks and it's all horrible. I just it's ridiculous. It's you can argue the league. I mean, I would argue the talent level in the league right now, it's as good as it's ever been. It's the most talented up and down that I think you've ever seen in the league. I mean, you can watch like every team and they have a guy that you're like, oh, he's pretty fucking good. Like, it's a good player over there. And then you look at their record and it's like, oh, they're 12-38. Like, what happened?
Who is
there?
the player in Washington?
Honestly, I think Bilal Coulibaly is fun.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. But it's like
I think
he's a young player, but like, yeah.
Well, if you look at his numbers with Kuzma on the floor or without Kuzma on the floor, I think we know what's happening there. They did. I like
Kuzma got traded. He got a triple double, didn't he? I think Bilal got a triple double right after Kuzma got traded.
He looks like a baby too, man. He's so young. But I think he's super talented. Like you watch Utah and you're like, oh, Lauri Markkanen's just hanging out on this team, doing nothing. Maybe one day he'll play a single NBA game of any magnitude, but it won't be this year. But yeah, like it's the league is it's in a great place in terms of like where the amount of talent. I mean, I've been watching the Blazers a bunch, and like they've been hooping lately. Like I've been enjoying watching them, and you see like they have different players rising up. It's I don't know. It just feels like this weird misery that NBA fans have to be miserable about the league at all times. Like even the All-Star stuff. Look, I thought it sucked. Just don't fucking watch. Like if you hate it that much, just don't watch. I don't like. How does it bother you that much? Like the All-Star game has been a joke for a while now. You don't need to be upset about it every single time. It is a joke because that's just how it's going to be. I don't know. I'm definitely being a little bit hypocritical because I definitely bitch about it too. But like, other than like, I just would like to see these guys just come back for the dunk contest. Just do the dunk contest. Make the dunk contest a thing again. Like we don't need to see
great again.
Yeah, please make it great again. I don't know. That one is kind of sad to me, the dunk contest. But I don't know if you guys have thoughts on the All-Star stuff or the state of the league because I think it's like a very boring conversation, honestly. If you're going to be miserable about the NBA, then I don't know. I just think this league is as fun as it's been in a long time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point about teams not teams aren't getting threes in the same way, right? I mean, the Rockets used to take a lot of threes. It was a completely different style of offense than the Celtics. I saw an interesting stat that like the points per shot for the first time in a long time is higher again for twos than threes. But the beauty of the league is, and this is why I always hesitate when people want to bring up rule changes and stuff. It's like teams adapt. This isn't a static thing, right? Remember when bigs were going to go by the wayside, right? Bigs evolved their skills. Teams realized that, we can get talented bigs who are now undervalued, and the game evolved to incorporate them, and they started shooting a little bit more. Bigs who might have been considered tweeners in the past are now like bigs with guard skills, right? And it's a continuous evolution thing. And I think people are just, and like the game is it's a copycat league. Like how often have we heard that before, right? In the 80s and 90s, everyone was like, throw it down to the big man in the post. And people miss those one-on-one battles. I get that. Maybe you want a little bit more. But if those guys are truly undervalued, then teams will adapt, especially because it is hard to build Boston. And the guys the Derek Whites of the league and the 3-and-D guys that build these teams and the long-rangey wings, those become harder to get. So now you have to find another opportunity. Like the idea that this is just like people have always say this, and this goes, by the way, for people who grumble about the state of the game, and it has been a fault of analytics folks, right? Analytics has solved the game. That creates this static idea, right? That this is like it's chess or it's some kind of a math. It's not a math problem. Math helps, right? And all of these tools help, but it's constantly evolving. So you're not going to solve this game any more than a species can solve evolution. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the whole bigs thing was always so stupid because all that happened is that there was like a period of time where there was just no good bigs coming into the league. It was like DeMarcus Cousins was like the best guy that got drafted for a 5-year period, and you're like, all right. I mean, DeMarcus Boogie was fun, but like, if that's the best big that's coming into your league over extended time period, it is what it is.
And it's happened in the NFL too, by the way. I mean, I don't know if you heard, but like the offensive player of the year was a running back, and he won Super Bowl. So yeah, it's like running games are now in again too, right? So anyway, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Nobody wants to talk about the Eagles. All right. SJ, anything else you wanted to any takes you wanted to let fly before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I agree with all the league is in a bad place takes are completely overblown. And I mean, people just, I think it's the kind of puppet tearing that's going on where people are just like repeating what they see other people say. And a lot of the times, it's like completely wrong. Like some of the things that they're saying to kind of fit their narrative. And it's like, we can, fact check some of these things. Like, Eddie Johnson on Twitter talking about how every team, just runs pick and roll all game. And, people were, commenting to him like, hey, that's actually not true. We have the data to show that, pick and roll usage is actually the lowest it's been since like 10 years. It's been like 10 years. So I just think there's just a lot of people just repeating what they see people say. And, coverage of the league is a big part, plays a big part in that, where All-Star Weekend, I mean, I was having fun with the games. Like even some of the little things like Dame versus the Fan was fun, the Kevin Hart stuff was just it's just so I could not tolerate it at all because he's yelling, because he's also repeating what he sees people say. Oh, getting the post, like he was yelling, oh, getting guards should play like guards. Like you're just repeating what you see people say. And then Draymond, his entire like segments were just shitting on everything, shitting on the format, shitting on the rising stars, one of which was his teammate. Like it's just like that has to go. That is what's poisoning, or one of the things that are just poisoning like the league. But I mean, that's all. I think the game is in a good place. There's obviously some things that need to be fixed, but they won't get fixed because of capitalism. It's not like I think they should shorten the season, for example. That's just not going to happen. I don't think they're not going to take games away for various reasons. All the presentation stuff, like all the ads we're complaining about, I don't think they're gonna they want that revenue, so it is what it is.
Yeah, even All-Star Weekend as a whole, people are like, oh, they should just get rid of it. It's like, no, it makes too much money.
They're not going to get rid of it. So it's just like certain things I think we can want better, and some of the things are bare minimum. Like I felt the All-Star Weekend thing, like I wasn't going to complain as much this year because last year I was really over the complaints. Like it was terrible last year, but I'm like, just stop watching y'all. Like y'all watch every year just complain. This year was particularly disgraceful because I feel like for years we've been saying, oh, the problem is the players aren't playing hard, and you finally kind of fix that this year where they're actually playing hard. The games are kind of fun, kind of obviously they're not going 110%. Like it still has the feel of an exhibition game, but you see more defense, which was great. And then the presentation just falls flat on its face. Like that ceremony, I don't think I was so pissed off that occurred in the middle of that game
inside the NBA.
Yeah, that was just so ridiculous. Just certain things that I'm like, stop messing up the bare minimum. That's my issue. Like, stop messing up the bare minimum. Like, we can scrape by. Like, the product itself, people are talking about how it's bad. I don't agree with that. Like, of course, all 82 games for every single team, like all of them are not going to be entertaining. Like, you pick one day of the regular season where it's a couple blowouts and you try to use that to make an indictment on the whole league, even though we have several nights where there's so many competitive games on. I just think people are just complaining to complain, but at the same time, the league trips over itself like a lot. So I just think, I mean, all this fear mongering about how the league is gonna decline and all that, that's just nonsense with all the, deals that are signed and, all the TV deals, all that the fear mongering needs to stop. And I think people also need to start thinking for themselves.
Yeah. Well, not sure. I think that vote might have sailed, people thinking for themselves. All right. It's a good place to end this. SJ, thank you so much for coming on. I know this has been a trying few weeks for you here as a fan of the Mavericks, or once former fan of the Mavericks. Anything that you would like to plug before you get out of here?
No. Well, 21 going on 77 has now ended. We recorded our final episode a couple weeks ago, but I might be rebranding it into a solar endeavor. So stay tuned for that. It's in the works, potentially. So stay tuned to that. But you can always find me on Twitter at SJBasketball8.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Stacey.
Thanks for having me.
Yep. Stacey, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, plug all the great work of Strickland. Yeah. Let's gear up for that stretch run.
Yep. I will echo those sentiments. Enjoy the break between now and when the Knicks start playing again, and we all start hating and shitting on them anytime they have a bad sequence. All right. Thank you to our sponsor, BetOnline. Thanks to everybody that rocked out with us in the comments. Appreciate all that. That is our show for today. Hope everybody has a great week, and I will see you on Friday. Peace.